Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my epic rant on one of the most frustrating and devastating sequels of all time, Alien 3. Now, as you can see, I am not a fan of this film at all. I absolutely despise this film. In order to really put things into perspective in regards to the absolute failure of Alien 3, we have to go all the way back to its genesis, to the point where the sperm met the egg, so to speak. Because that in itself is unbelievably flawed. And honestly, to the point where it's laughable and ridiculous and so unbelievably bad that it's hard to even comprehend, let alone believe. When Aliens came out, it was a massive hit. Of course, there were plans that were put into place to conceptualize and to come up with ideas for a third installment in the franchise. But Sigourney Weaver, the star of the series, wanted nothing to do with it. So, understandably, because of that, a lot of the conceptual process, a lot of the scripts, a lot of the templates, a lot of the treatments didn't involve Ripley. So you had different writers tackle an Alien 3, like Eric Red or William Gibson. William Gibson, to me personally, he did the best script out of all of the proposed Alien 3 screenplays. His script had humans turning into aliens, throwing in some really intriguing body horror elements into the franchise, having Bishop and Hicks be the leads, having Ripley and Newt still alive, but off to the side so they can be saved for future installments if the actors or if specifically Sigourney Weaver agrees to come back to the franchise. And they had different characters that were brought into the mix, and you also had a lot of action. You had a climax that featured a zero gravity firefight with an alien queen. You had a new setting, which was this fun space mall concept. So there was a lot of things involving William Gibson's script that were fun and were more of what people wanted when it comes to an Alien 3. And this is even more absurd when you factor in the fact that they passed over that script in favor of a screenplay by Vincent Ward that dealt with Ripley crash landing on a wooden planet with a bunch of monks. That's an actual script. And that was the actual script that Fox greenlit for Alien 3. They started building sets for this disaster until they finally came to their senses and were like, this idea is stupid. This idea is unfilmable. And they scrapped it. But that wasn't until after they'd already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building these sets and doing pre production. So now, because of the fact that they had greenlit this dumb idea in favor of a much more profitable, a much better concept in William Gibson's script for Alien 3, they were left with nothing. So they had to start over from scratch. Vincent Ward, understandably, didn't want anything to do with the movie now because his script was thrown in the trash and his sets were being torn down. And so now they had to go into a completely different direction when it comes to a director. And they started this mad, frantic search to find a director, and they ultimately settled upon David Fincher. Now, David Fincher, to this day, has disowned this film. And doesn't matter what cut it is. He's disowned the theatrical cut and the assembly cut. He said things like, "No one hates this film more than me." And when you see what he had to deal with when it comes to the production of this movie, you can understand why. As well as when you see the final product, which is absolute shit. So, Fincher at this time was a complete newbie, a relative newborn, so to speak, when it comes to directing films. He had done some music videos for some pretty popular artists at the time that did get some buzz, but other than that, he hadn't done anything. So, in a lot of ways, I think that's really why Fox hired him. They're like, "Hey, he's a guy we can easily just tell him what to do and boss around and use as a little puppet." To make the movie that we want to make. Not the movie that Fincher wanted to make, but the movie that we want to make, the producers. And the producers include Sigourney Weaver. And that's a whole other story when it comes to just this fucking sad saga of the making of this movie. Because this movie was stuck in development hell for a long time because of Sigourney's unwillingness to be a part of the sequel. She didn't want to do any more Alien movies. She was even reluctant even doing Aliens in the first place. She had to be convinced by James Cameron that it wasn't a cash grab in order to do it. And it's rather ironic because the only reason why Sigourney agreed to do this movie is because of the cash. When it comes to Fincher's involvement with this and his work in the film, it's actually not that bad considering what he had to deal with. There are some okay looking shots here and there. There are some moments where you see some first time filmmaker jitters, like some of the upside down camera work in the finale. It's a bit gimmicky and it gets old after a while because he just doesn't really differentiate the shots enough. There's other moments too when it comes to shooting the xenomorph that look kind of chintzy and cheap. There's some other effects moments where it really looks like the effort of somebody who doesn't really have a ton of experience shooting effect sequences. And there's other moments involving the movie when it comes to the setting and just the overall landscape of it, where the direction is kind of flat. And so Fincher, despite, everything that was going against him, he finished the film. He got a film in the can, so I will give him a lot of credit for that, considering, like, all of the people that were, just stabbing him in the back, doing shit, without him knowing, or telling him to do certain things that he didn't wanna do. So it's one of those, films where the direction to me, it's not as dynamic and as strong as Fincher's other films in his filmography or other films in the franchise, and I definitely don't think it's as well directed as some people make it out to be. Like, it's okay, and the fact that it's okay is quite a feat considering all the different obstacles that Fincher had to deal with during the production. But Fincher's involvement as a director is not really where this film is fatally flawed. It's with its script. The screenplay by David Giler, Walter Hill, and Larry Ferguson, based on a story by Vincent Ward, but the only element of that story that's honestly carried over is maybe some vague religious undertones and the fact that Ripley crash lands on a planet. But instead of it being a wooden planet, it's a prison planet. Other than that, there's none of the aspects of Vincent Ward's script are really carried over. Instead, you get a script that was literally cobbled together and written while cameras were rolling. Now, I can't really talk about the script without talking about Sigourney Weaver, because Sigourney Weaver is a prime problem with this screenplay. Because her demands when it comes to the contract that she signed for this film are why this screenplay and this story is as limited as it is. She deliberately put this film in a box and put the franchise in a coffin because she did not want to do this film and she did not want to do any more Alien movies. So she put in the contract that Ripley has to die at the end of the film because she wanted to distance herself completely from this franchise. What better way to distance yourself completely than to kill your character off? Now you don't have to worry about ever doing another Alien movie because your character is dead. The writers, they were written into a corner when it comes to how to end this movie. The only way they could end it is if Ripley dies. They can't do anything differently. She's also the reason why there's no guns. Apparently, that did not get across to the promotional team, especially the people who were behind the video games for Alien 3, because in all of the video games, you can use guns. And there's comically an arcade game that's called Alien 3 The Gun. But there's no guns in Alien 3 because of Sigourney Weaver. So now you're limited in terms of what you can do action wise, because all you got is sharp sticks and harsh language. And there's probably some other things that Weaver was involved with creatively or conceptually, but a lot of the film's limitations in terms of where it can go with the story, it goes right down to Sigourney, the supposed hero, the supposed heroine of this franchise. And no, the ending is not something that the writers came up with, and it's not some brilliant, ballsy idea that these writers did. It was all Sigourney's idea. It was all her. It was in her contract before they even started writing anything. Now, this just insidious problem with this script continues with David Giler and Walter Hill's contributions to it. They are the ones that insisted that Hicks and Newt die. Not because they wanted to make the alien more threatening, not because they want to emphasize this bleak, depressing, soulless nature of the movie that people praise to this day, but because they just wanted a cheap shock. It's their words. They wanted to shock the audience. They wanted to take the audience out of their comfort zones. They wanted the cheap shock. It wasn't because of the fact that they wanted to emphasize the bleak, hopeless nature of the film or the franchise as a whole. They wanted to just have a cheap shock. Also, they didn't want to pay Michael Biehn. Fox still wound up paying Michael Biehn anyway because they didn't ask him at all to use his likeness. And so before Biehn could take it to court, they paid him a pretty good sum of money just so they could use his picture. I think another reason why they killed off Newt as well is so they didn't have to recast the actress or deal with the fact that Carrie Henn was older. So they didn't want to have to work around that. A lot of the reason behind those two dying is laziness. It's and just cheap shock tactics. It's not really this smart, brilliant bit of writing like people continue to say it is. The reason for that is a cheap shock and lazy writing. I mean, think about it. The only reason why that scene exists or why this sequel exists is because they made up an egg on the Soloco out of thin air. There's no explanation or no reason for an egg to be on the Soloco. For all of those people who call Alien 3 an unsung, brilliant masterpiece, and a film that's so well crafted and so well written, please explain to me how a fucking egg got on the Soloco. I've yet to hear a single valid explanation for it. You already have that, which is already just a sign of a cash grab, lazy sequel. I think another reason why things were written that way is because they were writing this script while they were shooting the film. While the cameras were rolling, they were writing dialogue. They were writing entire scenes. The script wasn't ready by the time that they started shooting the film. So Because of that, they cut corners. Hey, let's just shock the audience by killing off Hicks and Newt so we could start over from scratch. Oh, let's have an egg just somehow be on Silico and it starts a fire, and then Hicks and Newt die in the ensuing dis- disaster. And then Ripley crash lands on this prison planet. And now the whole prison planet idea, in theory, isn't necessarily that bad, but in execution, it's horrible. It's just like a planet full of like 25 varying different assholes, rapists, murderers, and child molesters. Great idea. That's such a brilliant concept. And all of them pretty much look the same and have not really that much in terms of personality or charm about them. There's like a couple that have a little differing traits. There's the doctor played by Charles Dance who actually has some depth. But other than that, like they're all the same. So they're all these generic prisoners, and so when the alien is stalking them, there's no suspense. It's boring. Because you took out Newton Hicks and only Ripley remains, you've hurt the stakes. You've made it so now the audience only has one character to care about. And then you fuck that up too, because the script for some reason doesn't know how to write Ripley as a character. All of a sudden, after Hicks and Newt die, and after an autopsy of Newt, like literally like hours later, after talking with the doctor for like the second time that she's been on this planet, she then gets horny and fucks him. Gets over the death of Hicks and Newt real quick and bangs some random guy. That's so totally out of character for Ripley. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make any sense. You can say it has to do with the feminist fucking parable or subtext all you fucking want to. It doesn't fit with the character. I don't care if it technically fits within the subtext or the invented subtext that you pulled out of your ass for this movie. It doesn't fit for the character of Ripley. Another thing that doesn't fit for the character of Ripley is why she's so secretive about the alien. Oh, it's cholera. Why? Why is she secretive about telling people about the alien? That's not at all what Ripley would be doing in that particular situation. Now, in my opinion, there's a lot of things in this script that just doesn't fit properly. Like there's a moment with Charles Dance's doctor character where he's talking to Ripley and he's providing his backstory. And it happens like a few minutes before he gets killed by the alien. That should have been earlier in the movie. And that should have been the catalyst for Ripley and the doctor to maybe kiss, because this is like their third or fourth meeting. She's been on the planet for like almost a month. And this is, you know, long after Hicks and Newt's death. And she understandably wants some companionship in her grief and her moment of need, and she finds it in the doctor, and they have this conversation with one another, and they share some pain, and then it leads to them going to bed. Like that makes sense. That fits. That's a gradual build up to that. There's actually a reason at that point for them to be infatuated or to be attracted to one another instead of this animalistic thing that doesn't make any sense. Now, speaking of animalistic, the idea of a hybrid alien is also interesting in theory, but you don't really see the hybrid alien do that much for the majority of the fucking film. You see the whole upside down camera work. You see it maybe crawl on the ceiling a couple times. But other than that, a lot of the stuff involving this hybrid alien is forgettable and not the least bit exciting, let alone intense or chilling or scary. It's just subdued and limited. The first time this alien shows up after it bursts out of the dog and kills one of the prisoners, it just hits the guy in the face, and then the guy falls into a giant fan. So even at that point, when you first see this alien, the first kill, it leaves no impression other than, eh. And then it continues. Oh, there's a cool looking shot of the alien with blood on it while it's hanging on the ceiling. Didn't see what it did to get covered in blood, but that's a cool looking shot, but it doesn't have the same impact because you didn't see what it did. I'm okay with like showing little things. But other than like a couple moments where it's like, popping the tongue out and busting through some people's heads, other than that, you don't see anything with this alien. So it doesn't really feel like that much of a threat. So the reason that some people use to praise the stupid idiotic decision to kill off Hicks and Newt to make the alien more threatening, it isn't more threatening. They don't do anything with that opportunity. And the whole idea of having a prison planet and having no prisoners that are at all innocent or have any semblance of their personality that isn't tied to them being also a rapist and murderer was pretty questionable, to say the least. This is simple screenwriting 101. You have to have characters that the audience can actually connect with. And if you're not going to write your main heroine properly, then you have to have somebody else to pick up the slack. And that never happens with this script, other than maybe the doctor character in some aspects. But even then, they drop the ball with that character because they don't give him depth until he's basically dead. Then you have Dylan. Okay, there's a promising character, has a crowd pleasing, great rousing speech at the end about not wanting to die on your knees. But the character is a rapist and murderer and is just an awful person. You easily could have just made that character somebody who was wrongfully convicted and sent to this prison by Wayland Yutani. And then you could have a lot of stuff where the other prisoners are busting his balls when he's like, I'm innocent. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a rapist. I never did the kind of shit that you fucking guys did. And then of course the guys are like, yeah, sure you're innocent. We all think we're innocent, especially in the eyes of God. You could do that kind of thing with it. And it provides a different dynamic than just everybody being a rapist, murderer, or child molester. Except for Ripley. Oh, and I guess maybe the warden and the other guy and the doctor, but the doctor still has a problem because he still killed some people. Not on purpose, but he still killed a lot of people. So it's just, to me, this isn't something that actually makes these characters more interesting. It makes them more generic. It does the opposite of what this script gets praised for. They're so much more interesting now because they're a bunch of rapists, prisoners, and child molesters and people you can't trust. It's also people you can't root for, and they're all the fucking same. And of course, then you get to other things like Bishop and how he's handled in this, which is another slap in the face. Oh, you get to see Bishop again, but only for like a little bit until he's like, disconnect me. I don't want to live anymore. You're like, great. It seems like this script goes out of its way to just continually flip the middle finger to fans of Aliens. Oh, hey, you like Aliens? Within the first 6 minutes of the movie, fuck you. Oh, hey, I just wanted to remind you if you're a fan of Aliens, fuck you. Oh, hey, how about here's an autopsy of Newt. Fuck you again. Oh, hey, you like Bishop? Oh, he doesn't want to live anymore, and he's all beat up and broken. Fuck you. Oh, how about a scene where a prisoner talks to Ripley about, do you have a family? Fuck you. Hey, you like aliens, and you like the fact that Ripley found her slice of heaven after being through hell and back. She dies at the end, so fuck you again. Actually, before that, she gets impregnated with an alien queen. So, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And that ending that people praise, like I don't really get it. In a different film, maybe with a different character, maybe that's something that I could maybe get behind, the sacrifice. But with it being Ripley, it just I feel numb to it because I know the motivation behind it. It's not because it was some unique bold writing choice. It's because Sigourney Weaver didn't want to fucking play this character anymore. Basically, Sigourney Weaver, Ripley herself, just flipping the bird as she's falling into the fire. Fuck you, I'm out of here, bye. Oh, it's so bold and ballsy and daring. Yeah, it does the equivalent of jumping off the nearest cliff. That's bold, that's daring and ballsy, but it's also incredibly stupid because you alienate your fan base and your core audience within the first 5 minutes of the movie. And then you never recover that audience throughout the rest of the movie. If you had stronger characters that were a part of this prison planet, if you didn't kill off Hicks, for instance, and he's the one that shows up and saves Ripley when she's being close to being assaulted by these prisoners, instead of it being Dylan with a crowbar, it's Hicks. Then you're like, wow, holy shit. That would have been a surprise moment, a crowd pleasing moment. Like I said, have Dylan be an innocent guy who's stuck with all these murderers and rapists and child molesters, and have him form a stronger bond and dynamic with Ripley instead of this random prisoner guy who's just annoying. Like the guy, they're trying to give him a personality, but the guy's just an annoying wanker. Maybe we want to have a sacrifice. Maybe it have Hicks be the one that sacrifices himself at the end. Maybe Hicks is the one that actually is impregnated with the queen. I don't know if I would really necessarily like that either, but I would prefer that over Ripley dying because the whole point of Ripley is that she's a survivor. To end her arc with her dying, it defeats the entire purpose of her character, if you ask me. And even like the stuff with Bishop too, like that just kind of felt like, come on now. Like you already were like, oh yeah, Bishop is dead, but here's another Bishop, and he's an asshole. It's like we already the reason why Bishop was unique is that he wasn't like Ash. Then you have this other Bishop that shows up, and it's like Ash. And speaking of recycling things from other alien movies, this entire script is just poor man's Alien. It really is. I have seen Alien ripoff scripts that were more unique than this screenplay. It doesn't mean the film is great because it makes you feel sad or it makes you realize that life sucks. That is only a theme that existed in Alien 3. Stop with this revisionist fucking bullshit history when it comes to this franchise. Just because you like Alien 3. If you like Alien 3, that's fine, but stop trying to do this revisionist history bullshit with this franchise when it comes to the true nature of it. It's always been about being bleak and hopeless. No, it has not. That's a fucking lie. Like the Alien 3 fan club is the nihilists from the Big Lebowski. That's really what that fan club is. Fuck me, nihilists. There's just so much about this script that sucks. Like even the whole no weapons thing, what they do with it sucks. Oh, the stuff with the barrels of flammable liquid, and some guy trips and falls and blows it up. The ending with the liquid metal, well, not liquid metal. Well, it is liquid metal. So the ending with the molten metal and the water, it's just a rip off of the ending of T2. Even Ripley falling into the fire is basically like the Terminator going into the fire and the lava, or not really lava, it's molten metal and giving the thumbs up. Even that's the same. Like, even that's unoriginal. It's also really boring. For the first 40 minutes or so, barely nothing happens. Like I said, the alien, what it does is boring most of the time. What you see in terms of the characterization, it doesn't matter what cut you watch. You can watch the assembly cut. Oh, there's more backstory for two other faceless, nameless prisoners. Big fucking deal. They're still rapists and murderers. Oh, they found God. They found religion. That in itself is laughable to me. It's not anything that makes it more interesting. It just makes me laugh at the film. That a whole group of rapists, murderers, and prisoners and psychotics are all going to have like one frame of mind and like sing kumbaya and have this whole belief in this shared religion. That's more of a fantasy than other fantastical elements of this franchise. There would be prisoners who would be like, no, you worship me. Or, wait a second, that's not the God that I worship. Like, there would be infighting. There would be no unity. That's a bunch of fucking bullshit. You have the cast, and the cast, in my opinion, isn't really that great. Sigourney Weaver, her performance is mediocre. There are times where her performance is actually not bad, some good showcases of emotion, some solid line delivery. There's other moments though where you could tell that she could not be bothered, that she doesn't want to fucking be here, that she doesn't give a shit. She just wants to take her paycheck and get the fuck out of Dodge. Like you can tell, you could fucking tell when it comes to to more than one sequence and more than one line of dialogue when it comes to her role in this. Charles S. Dutton does the best he can with not really that strong of a character, but I'll give him a lot of credit, a lot of kudos. He's definitely one of the better performers in the film. I wish he was in a better movie because he's wasted here. Charles Dance, another strong performer in this cast. Honestly, the last one that really left any significant positive impression on me is Clemens. Um, and he's another actor and another character I wish was in a better movie. Now, Brian Glover is the prison warden. I thought he was just really bad, just over the top, hamming it up in one note. His one note is just angry and loudmouth. That's it. Just angry, loudmouth, and obnoxious. That's the only note that the guy has. Uh, Ralph Brown as Aaron, the assistant of Andrews, 85. It's just there. Once again, not really a whole lot for him to work with, but I wouldn't say it's that particularly bad of a performance. Like the acting is okay. Paul McGann as Golick, the guy who's obsessed with the alien in the assembly cut, and at points in the theatrical version, I really wasn't that impressed with his performance. Danny Webb is Morse, the only survivor. Because I guess there is a survivor at the end of this movie, but it's a prisoner. Like that doesn't count because that character sucks. It's an annoying twat, and the acting by Danny Webb isn't really that much to write home about. It's not really that good. You never really buy this actor playing a character that feels real. Lance Henriksen, what can I really say about Lance Henriksen? He's got nothing to work with here. He's the voice of Damaged Bishop, and he plays Bishop 2. And honestly, you could kind of see that Lance, his heart wasn't fully in the whole Bishop 2 thing either. You could see that in his performance. Pete Postlewaite, nice to see him. Plays one of the random inmates, has like 3 lines of dialogue and dies. Holt McClaney, uh, uh, the the um the Indian guy from Creepshow 2, the one who's like, one more step and blam, this hair is gonna get me paid and laid. He's in this as one of the guys who tries to sexually assault Ripley and then gets his ass kicked. So, you see him for a little bit. But like there's nothing about this cast that is remarkable or really that great other than Charles S. Dutton and Charles Dance, because Sigourney Weaver's performance in this is just mediocre. The cinematography by Alex Thompson, it's not terrible, but it's just kind of there for me personally. I get it. It's supposed to be dingy and dull and bleak and hopeless because it fits the tone of the movie, but it just makes the film look dull. It's a dull looking movie. I see people say, oh, it's visually stunning. It's really not. It's dull and dingy and brown and gray and boring to look at. The same thing applies to the production design and the art direction. It's just varying degrees of rusted metal and dingy rooms. That's really about it. The editing by Terry Rawlings, not much better. There are some moments where it's pretty rough. And the effects, like the rotoscoping, is absolutely atrocious. This film features some of the worst rotoscoping I've ever seen because of how they lit it. I don't know who was responsible for that, but they really, really dropped the ball big time. Like they fucked that up royally. So it takes you out of the film when it comes to the scenes of the xenomorph because you can clearly tell that it's just a practical effect that was superimposed into a scene with rotoscoping. And it looks fake as hell. And the shots of the outside of the prison are pretty bad too. All this shit that's supposedly flying around the air, but it looks like ass. It looks like they just threw in some really cheap grain filter on there. It looks really bad. And yeah, there's just a lot of elements of this effects wise where it looks cheap. It looks really crappy. It looks like crud, which is, fitting for a film that, for the most part, Alien Goldenthal did a phenomenal job with this score. I legitimately love his score for this, especially the Adagio bit at the end. He did a really good job creating a score that sounded unique and his own, that didn't sound like it was just copying different notes from the previous Alien films. It fit the overall tone of the film really well. And it's just a nice score to listen to. And it's complicated and complex when it comes to its compositions. A lot of ways it evokes memories and feelings that you would associate with some classical music pieces. It's a really beautiful score. It's haunting, it's dark, but it's a beautiful score. And it just deserved to be in a good movie. Like a film that's worthy of the same level of care and approach and appreciation that Elliot put into his score. You can tell he put a lot into this score. And the amount of effort and work and passion that he puts into his score doesn't match anything else when it comes to this production. This film, it killed the franchise. It killed it dead. It put a gun to its head, pulled the trigger, blew its brains out. Game over, man. Game over. Now, they, of course, they continued to try to carry on, but the damage was done. And if you ask me, it was just so totally, completely unnecessary. And that's what makes it so frustrating. And one of the worst sequels. because it wasn't necessary. I'm sorry, no, it wasn't a necessary evil to kill Hicks and Newt. You didn't have to do that. Just like it wasn't necessary to have Ripley back. Her arc concluded with Alien and Aliens. It ended full circle. Left the door open for maybe her to return, but it wasn't necessary to continue on her story. You could have just followed a different character. If you wanted the prison planet thing, I don't know, make Dylan the lead. Like I said, he's an innocent prisoner who's stuck on this hellhole, has to deal with these rapists and murderers, and he's trying to get out, but he's unsuccessful. And now he has to deal with an alien that has somehow wound up on the prison planet. So now he's got to deal with the prisoners, the rapists, and the murderers, and now he's also got to deal with an alien. Somehow he's got to find a way to beat the odds. You can have the bleak and depressing tone, and you can take a different approach, but then you can also still have a standalone story. So you could have had the bleak and depressing tone. You could have Fincher as a director. You could have the dog alien or the ox alien. You could have had the prison planet and the prisoners and all of that. You could have done that without Ripley. You could have also done a story without Ripley that focused on fan favorites like Hicks and Bishop, and then left Newt and Ripley off to the side in cryosleep, waiting to be thawed out for another installment. Maybe when they find out what the home planet is for these xenomorphs, and now they take the fight to them directly. Or they decide to take the fight to Earth, and then Ripley and the rest of the crew, they head to Earth to join up with the other colonial marines to kick some ass and get some today. But instead, the people that were initially there to push the franchise in the right direction pushed it into a pit of boiling, molten metal and burned it till there was nothing left but ashes.